the European Union and Ukraine faced the wrath of Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, who accused Europe of fabricating lies to blame Moscow for stalled negotiations. At the core of his remarks was the charge that Ukraine, far from seeking peace, was being manipulated by European powers to prolong the war and avoid negotiations.
We are waiting for our European colleagues to finally stop lying about Russia blocking the negotiations. President Putin has many times responded to these deceitful statements, saying that it is, first of all, it is Ukraine, instigated by Europe, who is refusing to negotiate. Apart from the notorious Zelensky decree banning any negotiations with Russia, on a daily basis we hear statements that the Ukrainians don't need to sit at the negotiations table. First, they need to ensure battlefield superiority. This is the current outdated and obsolete rhetoric of the European countries regarding Ukraine.
Lavrov expressed Moscow's frustration over Europe's insistence that talks could only happen after Ukraine achieved military dominance. He dismissed this stance as an outdated Western strategy designed to keep Kyiv in a perpetual state of war.
We are of the opinion that the best help and assistance from those who sincerely want to settle this conflict is to recognize and realize its core reasons of this conflict. In his recent speeches, President Trump called the expansion of NATO and attempts to include Ukraine the biggest mistake by the Biden administration, and one of the core reasons for this conflict.
The Russian foreign minister then turned his fire on French President Emmanuel Macron, who had suggested deploying European peacekeeping troops to Ukraine, an idea that Moscow immediately rejected as a provocation.
Emmanuel Macron said after his meeting with President Trump on Tuesday that Washington and Paris finally agreed on the need to deploy European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine, and Moscow has many times said that it won't agree to any such scenario. Troops from what country would Russia agree to see in this capacity? This is out of question. We can't contemplate any options here. I don't know what Macron might say on that. He wasn't looking very convincing in Washington.
Lavrov's condemnation of Macron reflected deep Russian distrust, portraying the proposal as another attempt by the West to escalate the war rather than seek a resolution. He suggested that European leaders, particularly France and Britain, were more interested in prolonging the conflict than finding a settlement. Expanding on this, Lavrov warned that Europe's real objective was not peace, but the total integration of Ukraine into NATO and the erasure of Russian identity from Ukrainian society.
Macron says in Washington that they need to find a settlement that would not look as capitulation. These guys are quick to find their bearings, but not in everything. Their main goal is to eradicate the reason for conflict. And the reason for that is not absence of a peacekeeping contingent. The goal is to make Ukraine a territory in NATO and total eradication of all things Russian in Ukraine.
He accused Western leaders of using peace talks as a facade while pursuing policies aimed at dismantling Russian cultural and linguistic influence in Ukraine.
There were suggestions to split the territory. This is not the case. First of all, we have a constitution based on the free will of people. Besides, what's left of Ukraine should be freed of racist laws. There are still people remaining there who want to speak Russian, who want to maintain and preserve the traditions of their forebears, brought up in Russian culture. So simple mechanistic measures such as peacekeeper deployment will not be enough.
Despite the rising tensions, Lavrov revealed that Russian and American diplomats would meet in Istanbul on Thursday to discuss the operations of their embassies, an indication that some channels of communication remain open. The meeting follows last week's Russia-US talks in Saudi Arabia, which signaled a major shift in Washington's policy under President Trump and a departure from past efforts to isolate Moscow.
We announced that our diplomats, top-ranking diplomats and experts, are going to meet and take a look at the systemic problems that accumulated as a result of the previous administration's illegitimate activities. And of course, we responded to that in kind, creating uncomfortable conditions for the functioning of America's embassy in Moscow. I think the meeting is taking place tomorrow in Istanbul, and after that meeting we will realize how quickly and efficiently we're going to move forward.
Lavrov's statements painted a grim picture of the ongoing confrontation between Russia and the West. From his condemnation of Macron's troop proposal to his assertion that Europe is fueling the war, his words underscored how Moscow views NATO's involvement as an existential threat, one it is unwilling to tolerate.